Please let me reminisce a bit. 50 years ago, South Vietnam lost the war. Along with the Vietnamese refugees who escaped the communist regime and arrived in the USA, our big family, one of the first, resettled in Bloomington, Illinois. We arrived on a Tuesday and started working on Thursday. The owner of a soybean farm took pity on the refugee writer and gave him a low-labor job. With a tool that looked like scissors with a long handle, a sort of weed cutter, I leisurely strolled among the soybean rows and cut the weeds that grew among the beans. I normally worked about 4 hours in the morning. Weeding in the soybean field was light work. However, after a couple of hours, the job took a toll, especially due to the weather. At noon, while my belly and feet were still enjoying the cool air, my head and chest, exposed to the sun, began to heat up. It was hard for my body to cope with 2 different weather systems. The worst was the mud. The field was irrigated regularly. Sometimes, too much water made the soil very heavy. After work, our footwear disappeared under a thick layer of mud, along with our feet. My siblings and I had to undergo a thorough washing process. The boys, following their eldest brother's orders, were happy to clean the shoes half-heartedly. The girls were different. They washed their feet thoroughly, and their shoes even more, did not care much how long it took. The Saigon princesses were certainly unfamiliar with field work. The residence of Dr. Donald Wainscott, a veterinarian and one of our family's sponsors, was on the outskirts of Normal, close to the field. At noon, we only had to cross a short distance and a road to reach the water faucet in his front yard. There, we had all the water we needed to clean our shoes and feet. One day, perhaps due to heavy rain the previous evening, we had a rough day coping with the mud. We were tired and hungry. Once we reached the water hose, I ordered, "Just wash your hands and feet. Our shoes are hopeless, old, and tattered. Just throw them into the bushes in the front yard." There were lots of shoes at the church warehouse when we went to beg for winter clothes, more than enough for us. The next day at noon, we returned to the water faucet, and, lo and behold, someone had cleaned the hopeless, old, and tattered shoes and neatly arranged them on the ground. It turned out Mrs. Rena Wainscott, in her quiet and compassionate way, had tried to ease the hardship of the refugees in their new homeland. Our sponsors helped us with all their hearts. Bloomington also gave me a rare and special opportunity. Knowing I was a writer and journalist, the editor of the Pantagraph, then the Daily Pantagraph, suggested that I write a daily journal depicting a refugee family struggling to assimilate. Still torn and tortured by the tragedy of my lost homeland, I couldn't accept the offer. Instead, I submitted The 492nd Day of the Ceasefire, a chapter from a story I wrote while South Vietnam was on her deathbed. It told the tragic deaths of my sister and her 2 young children in a rocket barrage by the Viet Cong on the night of June 6, 1974, in Bien Hoa Province, during a supposed ceasefire. The Pantagraph published the story with an introduction that concluded, "The 2 of them, my wife and I, in failing to write a diary, created a set of articles that strike us as unusually honest and moving. A most untraditional set of stories to offer our readers." Thus, in just a few months of trying to understand America through the people of Normal and Bloomington, the residents of Bloomington also came to understand me. A bona fide refugee, a man who had spent 20 years defending his country, only to suffer its ultimate fall, even though his strength had not failed. And, using his modest writing talent, he offered readers a glimpse of the tragedy and suffering inflicted by a war that had shattered his heart and home. One of war's terrifying arrows had pierced a tile roof near the Vac Bridge in Bien Hoa Province and tore apart his soul. That pain would burden him for the rest of his life. Bloomington had saved us during our most desperate moments. Its readers shared in my innermost grief, just as Vietnamese readers had done a year earlier through Bác Quan magazine. At the time, Bloomington was small. You could get to know the whole town in just a few days. When we eventually moved west, we left behind our father and one of my sisters, resting forever in Bloomington's evergreen cemetery. Thus, I loved and missed Bloomington just as I loved and missed Ha Dong, where I was born. The 492nd day of the ceasefire, the story I shared with Bloomington's readers, is now old news. Yet today, my sad war story is repeating itself, this time in Ukraine. Half a century ago, international communists provided Russian and Chinese arms to the Vietnamese communists to attack the last free bastion of the Vietnamese people. Now, it is Russian arms attacking Ukraine. The Vietnamese communists who shelled the houses near the Vac Bridge and killed my sister and nephews fought for a paradise they believed in. The Russian soldiers who now shell Ukraine and kill its children serve Putin's dream of reviving the Soviet Union. With the humane ideal, all men are created equal, the founders of the American Republic created a formidable constitution to protect human dignity. That ideal has long driven America to confront disasters, both natural and man-made, to fight hunger, disease, and cruelty, to defend humanity. When Putin invaded Ukraine, President Biden and many nations responded by helping Ukraine defend its territory. But during President Trump's term, that noble American ideal, to protect the people of Ukraine from evil, died a sudden death. At a White House meeting, Mr. Trump berated President Zelensky, saying, "You are gambling with World War III," suggesting Ukraine should surrender to avoid escalation. When Mr. Zelensky expressed his anger at Putin for the years of killing and destruction, Mr. Trump chastised him for lacking diplomatic tact, advising him to speak more respectfully of Putin to improve ceasefire chances. Worse still, Mr. Trump called Mr. Zelensky a dictator and the instigator of the war. And at a UN forum, America unexpectedly sided with Russia, the side of evil. I do not believe President Donald Trump is a nefarious man. Unlike others, he refrained from retaliating against Iran for rocket attacks, calculating the enemy's potential losses, and choosing mercy. He cares about both Ukrainian and Russian lives, and while he admires Putin, he has voiced occasional disagreement. He is not cruel, but because of his immense debts, he has aligned with the ogre. As U.S. President, his choices represent the nation. Thus, his actions are unfair to half the voters who did not support him, and even to many of his MAGA followers who love him but refuse to stand with brutality. He also disrespects our ancestors, the Founding Fathers, who fought to protect humanity and preserve America's role as a defender of good. The saddest part of this is that his choices embolden evil. These evil acts are those that demean human life. So, mourning the deaths of Gam, my sister and her children, Con Lin and Ku Ti, during a ceasefire more than 50 years ago, and mourning the fate of the heroic people of Ukraine, drowned in blood today, dear Bloomington, let us pray. Let us pray that the evils will never find an ally in the most prestigious House of America.